Alrighty, thanks team. We'll go now to minor nature, and so we've got the issue of manganese raised by Councillor Booth, so I'll just get you to talk to your questions if you like.
Thank you, Mayor Bowen. Look, I'm in receipt of a report that was prepared by Environment Canterbury around our water issue, investigation into our water issue over Christmas last year, what it was, and obviously it's become quite apparent that the manganese from a rather large silage pit, which was allowed to be established within a drinking water zone, rightly or wrongly, it's identified as probably the cause of the manganese in our water. And we, I guess, right at the time when we have been up against the Three Waters reforms, and obviously, Mayor Bowen, you've been defending that. But I'm concerned that we haven't actually. I've mentioned a couple of times we really needed to have our own independent experts and not rely upon the regulatory authority actually investigating themselves. And I'm quite concerned about that. I understand from our Chief Executive that there are moves afoot, but really it's cost a lot of money, and not only money, it's cost our reputation quite severely. And you were grilled about that in the select process in Wellington the other day, and in actual fact, really we should be trying to hold someone accountable for this. Someone's done the wrong thing, and for that to have happened, it's put all our ratepayers' drinking water at risk, and our reputation. It's also costs us money. So I'd like to see, I'd like to see something being done about it, and we should have our own independent advice. Yep.
Thanks, Councillor Booth, and I echo your sentiments, and it is frustrating that it's taken time it has to get that information to us, when we did highlight numerous times that there was other things at play, and that was our position on Three Waters reform, knowing that it was unlikely to be a fault of the pipes effectively, or the fault of the territorial authority. And I think our team did a great job in mitigating the effects and getting us to a position where we could still deliver quality, although coloured product to our ratepayers in urban Timaru, but frustrating for the people at the time. So let's talk about next steps, and I'll just ask perhaps Mr Dixon and Mr Curran to discuss the analysis of their report, and then also when we might be likely to have ECAN come and present, I think is key as well. Thank you.
Thank you, Your Worship. So, we have engaged a scientist from PDP, Peter Callender, to undertake a peer review. And we think that's an appropriate step to take because he can take the report and assess the assumptions, assess the data, and report to us on his conclusions. Now, we are asking for that to be done on an expedited basis, and we always made it clear to ECAN when they spoke to us that the report that they prepared would be discussed in an open meeting and so on. So as soon as we have it available, but I think we engaged Mr Callender, I think in the last week or so, and I don't know if Mr Dixon's able to update us on how long, but we have asked him to do it as promptly as possible. Now, there's probably a deal of work for him to undertake to complete that, because he also will be aware that others will be casting a professional eye over his critique of that report. And as soon as we have it, we will. But I think at this stage, getting an independent peer review of that report will tell us whether or not there's merit in us commissioning our own report, which would take a considerable length of time and probably would not, would cost a reasonable amount of money. But he will be able to tell us whether there's any benefit in that from his assessment of the ECAN prepared report.
Well, I guess I'd like to think that we could broaden that scope and actually do an independent review of the entire incident, whereas you're looking at the actual the silage pit itself, the location, and looking at all our readings and actually coming to their own, actually forming their own report, and actually looking at the fact who consented it and who allowed that to happen and who's responsible for that. That's what I would like to see, because this Environment Canterbury report is actually a snow job. And what I see here, they've used a number of different scales to make the manganese level look less than it really was. And when you put that scale, put them all onto one scale, it's very obvious, and it's what actually happened. And so, someone needs to take responsibility, and unfortunately, the regulatory authority who was supposed to be doing their job, and in my opinion, failed. We need to have an independent investigation on a broad scale.
One of the issues in getting an independent investigation is that Environment Canterbury have the data. So in reality, the peer review is an independent investigation, because they will have access to all the data and will be able to independently review and look at the conclusions that they have reached. Now, the activity was not consented. That is an issue. Whether it needed to be consented or not, I don't know. ECAN would have to answer that question. So it is important that we work with ECAN in order to have access to all the information that's there. We certainly contributed some of that data, but only a small part of it. So
did we as a council know, and were we warned about the fact there was a large silage pit right beside our water intake?
That had been noted, that was a potential source, and the ECAN did follow, and that's when it was removed. It is very hard. At the end of the day, we have to prove without doubt that was the cause, and if the report that has been presented from ECAN is it is most likely but not confirmed, our independent review may reach another conclusion, and I hope they do.
Councillor Puddington, thanks.
Look, I support Councillor Booth's comments, mainly that we need to, I'm happy with what Andrew said, I understand the figures and that, but I mean, to cut to the chase, and we're looking for compensation from ECAN, because we've got to know what we're doing all this for, if that makes sense as well. And historically, have they ever given us any compensation for errors on their behalf? Because, I mean, I'm asking where we're trying to get to with this. Because there's not point spending tens of thousands of dollars to say it was a silage pit, but we can't do anything, if you know what I mean.
Well, I guess what was, perhaps the Chief Executive could offer a number of what it actually cost us, other than our reputation in dollar numbers.
Yeah, I'm not trying to pass a bad penny or a hot potato around here, but I know that, I do know that for instance, we had some direct costs such as the tankers, and I think by the time we paid for those and any infrastructure that was needed, it was about 130 to 150,000, was it, Andrew? Then we had maybe some, what you might call indirect costs, where we advanced part of the Pariora pipeline in order to give ourselves a bit more redundancy and resilience against not being able to take as much water as we wanted. How much was that in the round, Andrew?
It was about 130, I think, yeah. Additional cost for the fast tracking, yeah.
we would also have, sorry, Richard, can you?
You just jump out and we'll get you back in. Thank you.
I mean, then there's other costs that are a bit harder for us to attribute because we didn't sort of specify exactly of our officers the time that they spent, because there was a considerable amount of effort put in by officers over the Christmas New Year period to identify the issue and then work out how to resolve it. And then I think they had some river works done so that we could take more from one of the infiltration galleries that weren't as susceptible to the manganese and so on. But some of those had, some of those costs, such as the officer costs, would be quite hard for us to specify because we're incurring them anyway, and it's probably work they didn't do because they were diverted in order to go and attend to this matter. So that's the likes of our drainage and water manager, our person who runs Claremont, Mr. Clements, and some of his team and so on. So it's that sort of cost that's a bit more difficult, but there's no doubt we incurred a material sum of money managing that issue in a very short order, and it was made clear at the select committee when the matter was put by the member for Christchurch Central that this was a regulatory issue, not an issue of the Territorial Authority, who actually was able to respond quickly and with their contractors comprehensively to resolve the issue. Andrew, are you able to add anything to the costs in order to enlighten the councillors?
Well, the other thing I would point out, there is a little bit of a flip side in that there were cost savings because we weren't actually pumping from the Otaheite during that period, so extensive time. So there was a slight reduction in costs there, and power costs there.
Councillor Booth.
I guess I note that they were installed in 2017, these bores. What was the reason? Why were they installed? Was there some other, was there an issue found and you're trying to work out what was going on?
You're talking regard to the test bores?
Test bores, yeah, there was 3 test bores in there already, of which the one was really, really high, which was directly below the silage pit. What was the reason?
Did that line up with extension of the water protection zone area, the test boards?
Yeah, they were monitoring bores. Part of that's tied up with our resource consent requirements for taking of water, and the other side of it is for protection and basically, making sure the water quality is suitable around where we're taking the water. So some of those bores were installed by us and some were installed by ECAN.
So did the idea that there was a silage pit less than a couple of 100 metres away, did that not, was that that obviously would have been considered when the consent, when you were fulfilling requirements around the consent. The fact that that was in a drinking zone, a drinking water zone.
The silage pit had been there for quite a while and it showed no issue. I think that the change was potentially due to the fact that the silage pit increased in size quite markedly with the change in the farming operation of that particular farm.
Okay, I think you've got the gist of what we need.
Yeah, I think so. I think we can move forward. And look, the key thing, I mean, the consenting one's an interesting one. Does it have existing use rights or not? It's actually not for us to decide that, but we'll be an interested party, obviously. So, next steps, I'm comfortable that we are going to be reviewing that. I think the key thing is that we need within that scope is understanding that the data set is, because it's about inputs, and you're going to get out what inputs are provided. So is that relevant? So I think we just need to know that. Is it, broad enough in scale to give us the data that we need? And then as far as next steps, I think one of the concerning things is, our water protection zones across the district. We just need, probably a written guarantee, and I know they are looking at those specifically, but that they are, being monitored correctly. And, do we or our officers have any concerns around any of the other zones? That would be my concern or immediate concern.
Certainly ECAN are more aware of their responsibilities around water protection zones, and in fact up at the Rari, where the Temuka water takers, ECAN declined a resource consent quite recently for a truck stop, which included the storage of fuel tanks. So, yeah, I think they definitely got that. And under the Water Services Act, which went through in November last year, there is some legal obligations on the regional council regarding water protection zones.
Yeah, cool. So I know ECAN have offered to come and talk to us, and I think it's really important that they come to the chamber and we can have a discussion. Is that likely? I'm conscious that we've only got one more meeting. Is that likely, do you think, to line up with the 4th of October? Anyone able to say yea or no?
Yeah, well, I would certainly approach ECAN and we can try. It would be, yeah, whether they're available and whether they're willing, but.
Yeah, look, I think they offered that in the report, that they would come and have a discussion with us, so.
I think, Your Worship, yes, we can certainly extend the invitation with a degree of urgency attached to it. The other part is whether the peer review can be completed by then. I think it would be helpful if we were able to have both, and that's really what we're seeking to have at the same time.
No, that's a valid point. Well, ideally that lines up, and if not, it's consideration for the next council. Councillor Booth.
I just do note that they actually have already supplied a peer review, so it's not much point, you know, that was included in that information you sent.
Yes, so through you, Your Worship, when ECAN first approached, advised us about the imminent arrival of the report, we had a discussion with them and suggested that it may be appropriate for them to get a peer review of their own work, for the point that you had raised, Councillor Booth, that they're the regulatory authority, they're doing an investigation on themselves in one sense, and so, but we also signalled that we ourselves would get our person who would review it according to our terms of reference, and so on. So there's a peer review for them of their work, but we are seeking our own independent peer review so that we get the assurance around that report that we ourselves have had an opportunity to test it, if you like.
Cool. Thank you. And I think, you know, that consideration of any costs which Councillor Piddington you raises just probably for a future discussion once we have further information. So thanks, Andrew. I think we can move on now. So we've addressed minor natures. Before we move to public excluded, we might just adjourn for 5 minutes, and then when we come back in, we will head towards that public excluded item. So if you just take an adjournment for 5 minutes, thanks.